Is the NCAA a cartel? When we visualize the word cartel, we think of mountain of money, corruption, crime, and drugs for profit. The same could be said for the NCAA. Mountains of money, corruption, but instead of drugs for profit, it's players. The NCAA forced players to listen to them, and if they don't, well, then they're cut off from the organization, much like a cartel. The NCAA is a money-hungry organization that only cares about itself and does not care about its players. So much so that players will start going to amateur leagues and not going to the NCAA because they are treated poorly. For example, Jalen Green, an NBA star, was committed to go play NCAA basketball at Wisconsin, but he decided not to because he would not be paid and because he didn't want to go somewhere where he felt like his time was being wasted because his time is valuable. Instead, he went to the NBA G League and he made $300,000 before going to the NBA. $300,000 to a college student is a big difference when compared to a regular athlete who just plays for the school and doesn't make any money. So that is a huge advantage that players can have now, is not even going to the NCAA and going to the G League because they want to avoid the corruption of the NCAA. After a senior year, athletes are left with pretty much nothing. They have a poor education because their time spent during sports wasn't, or their education wasn't their main priority when they were spending their time playing their sports. It was always, what comes next in my sport? What game is next? What this is next? They miss so many tests and quizzes during the season from being out of town that it just hurts their overall grade. For example, the average student's GPA is a 3.04. The average athlete's GPA is a 2.84, proving that athletes have significantly lower GPAs because they don't have any time to study because they're so much involved in their sport, and they don't get paid anything either. So why go to NCAA? The NCAA is also like a cartel in the way that they cut off their competition. For example, the AIAW was an organization in the 1970s for women athletes. It was a women's sports organization, and the NCAA cut them off because they saw them as competition. And in response to that, they then started scheduling their own women's sports contests so that women would have something to do and that they could have that organization as well. Another example of having this is with the NIT. The NIT was a basketball tournament that was second behind March Madness in terms of popularity. March Madness has always been the best basketball tournament, but the NCAA saw the NIT as a risk. So what did they do? They took over the organization, kicked out all the employees, and then made their own organization that was sub the March Madness, and they called it the NIT. They didn't even change their name. They used that organization to be a loser's bracket for March Madness so that the teams that weren't good enough to get into March Madness could go play for that. And that's just not fair to do. That is just something that resembles a cartel, and I see that very comparison with the NCAA and a cartel. So is it even worth it? So Zion Williamson, a guaranteed number one pick, best prospect that the NBA has seen since LeBron, was playing in a game against UNC when he planted his foot and blew out his shoe. His foot literally went through his shoe. And he was injured, and he left, and he was out for a long time of the season, but he wanted to come back and compete to win a national championship with his team because his team was very good. He did not, however, want to wear Nikes, but since the NCAA was on an endorsement deal with Nikes, he was forced to wear them. This ended up hurting him even more, and even to the point where today in the NBA, he was drafted still number one overall, like he should be, but he's been out for so long, and he's dealt with so many injuries, and it's really hindered his career, and he hasn't been able to play. Same thing could be said with Jerry Nichols. Jerry Nichols tore his ACL twice in Adidas in high school, and he was forced to wear them in college because of an endorsement deal. He would not wear them, and he was the best player on Arkansas State. As a result, their views plummeted, and he refused to play, and the NCAA, as a result, benched him. The NCAA is very my way or the highway, so much like a cartel. Another example of a player being treated unfairly is Johnny Manziel. Johnny Manziel was a great college football player. In 1 year, off donations alone, he brought in $740 million in fundraising. That is so much money to receive zero of it. He didn't receive a thing of $740 million that he brought in. As a result, he went to the NFL. He had a very underwhelming career. He was a bust, but he didn't make any money in the NFL. And after being one of the best college football players of all time, he didn't really make a dime from it. So here's one last example of a player being treated unfairly is with Shabazz Napier. He was a star at UConn, and there was nights where he was starving. He claimed he was starving because he didn't have money to feed himself. He didn't have money because all of his extra time was going to the sport, so he couldn't work a job, he couldn't make money, and he couldn't get decent grades because the NCAA is taking up all of his time for nothing. Only 3.9% of college athletes make it pro. So the other 96% are going to have this lessened education and lessened opportunity. And they, however, even though they are given a free education and opportunity, it's still not enough. For many athletes today, it is not worth it to go NCAA and take this path. In conclusion, NCAA athletes are now more than ever hesitant to sign with the NCAA because of the power they hold. All in all, NCAA athletes are treated very poorly, and they do not have the ability to make their own decisions at such an important stage in their life because the grasp of that the NCAA has on them. This makes it so hard for athletes, and it makes them wonder, is it even worth it to go to college? And it proves to you that the NCAA resembles a cartel.